Welcome back to the Dawn Show. We're going to welcome Dr. Jill McDevitt and, of course, Neil Zorin back here live. But we've been talking to Dr. Rob Danoff of the ARIA Health Centers on the phone. And actually, Dr. Rob, I know you have patients to care for, but just a final thought from you about HPV, Michael Douglas, and where this takes us in our conversation in the public and for our own safety and health.
I think where it takes you is it's important to, if you have kids, to speak with their physician, to be open and to listen and know for a fact that these vaccines have been used now for years and that it's pretty safe and it really can prevent cancer. Why prevent, you want to prevent something that you don't have to worry about later. But the increase of HPV infections is getting worse. It's very important to use protection and to please be aware of it. And especially nowadays, many people are having more and more partners, and we can't go into this thing that we don't have to worry about it just because it can't be seen, because a lot of times HPV cannot be seen. Men and women may not have any signs of the infection at all.
And there's no test for men, right? There's no test for men?
Yeah, you don't know that they have it. You don't know. And women often, they may not have any symptoms either. So that's the thing. You may not know. Women may not have the signs of the warts or anything else, and men may not. But it can be transmitted, from the flakes of skin with the virus on it. It can be transmitted from fingers and saliva and genitalia. So any type of intimate contact will transmit the virus. That's why I encourage parents or young adults to consider having this, because I have to tell you, the highest incidence of people with these diseases right now is up to age 24. And even after that, they have it. But young adults are the ones where this is starting to be, it's the tip of the iceberg. So that's why I'd say if you haven't been vaccinated, please speak with your doctor and consider it.
Well, Dr. Rob Danoff, we know you have patients to get back to at ARIA Health there, but thank you so much for all your information, for letting us pick your brains here on the Dawn Show. Thanks, Dr. Rob.
Thank you for what you're doing to help people. Thank you.
Have a good one. Okay, let's get over to our sexologist, Dr. Jill McDevitt of Westchester. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
And Neil Zorin has been in the house many a time, an old friend. So, let's carry on this conversation that he's talking about, for example, safe sex. For years, for example, with the AIDS epidemic, Neil, you and I were talking about this, it was more with AIDS. And now what we're hearing is no matter what your age, no matter who you are, you should be safe.
And until people talked about AIDS, until it became, because it had different names, and people thought it was at one time only a disease for gay people, it was difficult for people to accept it and to do something about it. I was on boards in the early '80s that dealt with AIDS, and the big question was, because I was on there because I was gay, and most of the boards were made gay, you're dealing with a well-educated and self-interested audience, almost by definition. So the point is that maybe with some education things would stop, and they did diminish in the gay population. But then the question became, do you want to, what kind of organization are we? Are we a gay organization or an AIDS organization? Do we look at people in other populations who may have this? And of course the answer was yes. And the education doesn't always filter through, and the protection doesn't always filter through. So I think you really have to think about that, especially if there is no detection like there is in HPV.
As a sexologist, Dr. Jill, do you think a lot of this has to do with perceptions and misperceptions?
I think for me, especially what struck me when Michael Douglas came out with this announcement, was the negative reactions from folks, the ew factor. Everybody's like, ew, gosh, that's kind of nasty. And
really?
I'm like,
because I had one woman actually call me and she said, I'm not letting my husband near any media because I don't want him to see that, because that's all he needs is that excuse. Well, Michael Douglas, so I actually had people saying they didn't want, why is he talking about that?
Yeah, they were very like kind of, and that's very much how the AIDS epidemic was, this taboo, and who are these dirty people, and this very negative kind of. And I'm like, well, that's kind of the pot calling the kettle black, because I don't know what was mentioned last segment, but this is like as common as the common cold, HPV is. Almost everybody who's ever had any kind of sexual contact has had or will have HPV. So I'm kind of like, who are all these judgments coming from? Folks who themselves may have, and they may not know it. Right. So I've been kind of less on the prevention, because there's lots of good doctors and folks doing the prevention piece, and more on the shattering the taboos, and let's have a little compassion, and this is a disease and this is cancer, so we need to have a little compassion.
Exactly. We're not in the Victorian era anymore. These things happen in the Victorian era era, but
nobody talked about it.
Well, you talk about it, number one, and it was totally taboo, but we're not in that era anymore. And also, we do have things to prevent. We do have things to talk about. You know that you can be tested for AIDS. You know that you can't be tested necessarily for HPV, but there is still things you can do. And I believe that my life was saved because of things I did back in the late 70s.
Well, and I love your story. That if you wouldn't mind sharing it, you've shared it with me privately. That because you were proper or you had respect for yourself,
I always insist on a proper date. I'd actually be in bars and talking to somebody, and my friends would tell people, "You think you're going to be lucky tonight, but you're not, because he's going to insist on a proper date." And I'd come back from the bar with 2 drinks, and somebody would say, "What's the proper date?" I said, No dark lights, no darkness. It has to be in light. It has to be no alcohol. We have to get to know each other. And it's not even because of sexual transmitted diseases. I wasn't even thinking of those at the time. I was petite. I'm not anymore, but I was petite at the time, and I was afraid of being hurt. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't with a psychopath. But that type of protection protected me from also, because I just stopped me, and I'm not being, what a good boy am I, because there could be regrets too, from being promiscuous. But it's not really promiscuity. It is the act of just being adult.
Well, exactly, and I think that's your prerogative to date like that. Other people don't. I don't think that's not being respectful of yourself. But I think look at Michael Douglas. He contracted this from having sex with his wife. Who uses dental dams and condoms when they have sex or oral sex with their married partner?
Well, should they be?
Right.
Well, that could be an argument, but I think that if he came out with this and people were like, ew, what could he have done different that we are all doing? Who's using dental dams?
Right?
And is it this wife? Because can this be dormant? It's a question for you. Is this something that can lie dormant in somebody's system, as Dr. Rob said? It could be there for years without anybody knowing.
Well,
it.
most of the time it sheds itself after a few years. So it usually tends to be a new infection.
Oh.
Tends to be. It doesn't always.
No, that's
have
good
to
to
be.
know.
It
That's
can,
important.
But
All right, hold our conversation.
Okay.
When the Dawn Show continues, we'll talk about Liberace, media images. We'll have some more fun with Dr. Jill and Neil Zorin when we come right back.